Speaking about the economy and the growth picture, we've had a series of meetings between industrialists, bankers and the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council Chief Dr. Rangarajan, who's playing a more and more crucial role in the running of the Finance Ministry. CII Chief Adi Godrej was down in the capital earlier this week. We had a chance to speak to him to ask him what specifically was discussed at that meeting.
No, we have suggested that the government should have a revival package for growth in the economy. Now, there are many possibilities to accelerate growth in India, and quick action by the government in the reform process would be extremely helpful. And we think a growth of 8 to 9% in the second half of this year and in 13-14 is eminently possible if the reform process is carried forward. So, of course, the main suggestion was that the goods and services tax should be introduced at the earliest and should definitely be in place by April 2013, because that is the single most important reform that could stimulate the Indian economy. We think it would add 1.5 to 2 percentage points to India's GDP growth rate, other things being equal, and it will be very complementary to other reforms that can be implemented. Then we have also suggested that the fiscal deficit should be brought down, both through disinvestment, and we've explained that we are very disappointed that there's been no disinvestment in the first quarter. Disinvestment should go on throughout the year, not as an emergency measure in the last quarter of every financial year, and then the targets are not met. And the other thing was, of course, what has been debated quite considerably is subsidies need to be reduced, especially on diesel. So those were the suggestions. We have also suggested that FDI in multi-brand retail, aviation, defense, and insurance should be brought in at the earliest. So several of the pending reforms, of course, there are some reforms pending in Parliament. They can also be looked into, but the earlier we get into a quick-fire reform mode, and the Prime Minister has himself mentioned that he would like to release the animal spirits of the economy. So we are fully aligned to that goal.
Mr. Godrej, you're talking about the big ticket reforms, but a lot of people have pointed out that the problem is, just at the pace level, the pace at which implementation on existing projects is happening. Did you bring that up? Any suggestions from the industry on how that can be speeded up?
Yes, very definitely. We spoke about that, but not a question of before we get to that. There's no need to delay these reforms. And we should clearly enunciate that these reforms, even the ones that need parliamentary approval, we should have a timeline. And we have also suggested that the political parties should cooperate, the states should cooperate. We have appealed to the opposition parties, the coalition partners to cooperate in this reform process so that growth is restored. But we clearly discussed that important projects should be followed up. In fact, the government has already announced 2 committees, one for all projects above 1,000 crore in the private sector and one for those above 1,000 crore in the public sector. So those 2 committees have already been formulated, and we have said that they should work quickly, efficiently, and in a regular manner so that these projects can be taken forward, and any sort of obstructions in the way of these projects can be cleared very quickly.
All right, and as we've been speaking, the markets are down to day's low. You got a 0.7% cut on the Nifty and on the Sensex. The currency is also coming off very steeply. Something seems to have changed just in the last couple of minutes. But to get back to our conversation with Mr. Godrej, Mr. Godrej, did interest rates come up for discussion as well?
No, even in this meeting yesterday, we discussed about the rates. We feel rates must come down because they are definitely coming in the way of growth. And this argument that it's not interest rates, you can certainly say that it's not only interest rates that are coming in the way of growth, but interest rates is certainly, high interest rates are certainly one of the impediments to growth, especially in 2 areas. One is in investments. Clearly, new manufacturing investments will be held up, which not only affects growth at present, but it will affect future growth. And the other area is where consumers need to finance, like residential, housing, automobiles, etc., where high interest rates are an inhibition to consumption, and these sectors' demand has slowed down, and that affects growth too. So we definitely took this up. We think the CRR rate also needs to be reduced. And we also talked of defending the rupee. The depreciating rupee is causing inflation, which in turn will negatively affect growth in many ways, including RBI action. So we spoke about defending the rupee and having policy to see that the rupee doesn't fluctuate very much nor depreciate very much.
Last question, Mr. Godrej, and this is more your assessment of where things stand in the economy. How bad is it out there? People have suggested that it's the consumption end that could crack right now. What are you seeing, sir?
Well, clearly, if the economy, if growth doesn't revive, it's bound to take place, especially if we face a poor monsoon. So clearly, consumption of items which are financed, as I mentioned, like residential housing and automobiles have been affected, and something needs to be done, and other consumption would also be affected if GDP growth slows down. And with facing the possibility of a not so good monsoon, all the more do we need reforms in other sectors so that growth is restored. The good news is that among the large economies of the world, India perhaps has the best potential for reform to restore growth. Even if you look at Europe, America, even China have their own problems. India has the possibilities. GST is perhaps the most important fiscal stimulus this economy can get. We should work together with the opposition, with the states, to see that this reform is instituted at the earliest.
All right, Mr. Godrej, thank you so much. That was Adi Godrej in conversation with us on the health of the economy. Meantime, the health of the market's not looking great. Days low, and the breadth of the market seems to be coming off as well. Bianca, I'll pick up on that. Bianca, over to you.